Take a close look at the title page of this 247-page book. It presents itself plainly as A Literary Review by Søren Kierkegaard. Published in 1846, it was ostensibly written to review a popular romance novel by anonymously published Danish author Thomasine Gyllenborg. But the review format was a Trojan horse. Under the guise of literary criticism, Kierkegaard smuggled in a devastating, highly precise critique of modern society. While drafting this text, Kierkegaard was locked in a bitter public feud with the Corsair, a slanderous Copenhagen tabloid. He was mocked relentlessly in print. The Corsair affair forced Kierkegaard to confront the mechanics of mass media. He watched how a printing press could manufacture an irresponsible, faceless crowd, capable of destroying a person's reputation without ever holding a single individual accountable. Because he needed to address this structural rot, his simple assignment ballooned. What began as a standard book review expanded into a massive cultural autopsy. To understand his diagnosis of the modern era, we are going to map the dialectic Kierkegaard builds in the opening pages of this text. Specifically, we will look at how he dismantles the tyranny of what he calls the demand of the times. Kierkegaard's cultural critique in Two Ages remains the definitive diagnosis of modernity's descent into mass anonymity. Kierkegaard roots his diagnosis in a single dual-meaning Danish word, reflection. This split screen separates the concept. Left, reflex acts as a mirror, reflecting an era's effect. Right, the dangerous reflection. It represents endless deliberation, a loop of overthinking. This reflection paralyzes the modern present age, flattening all decisive momentum into a gray, uniform plane of theory. This paralysis hollows out organic, active communities. In their place, the era leaves behind the demonic anonymity of the crowd, a mass of people who calculate endlessly but never commit to action. To see exactly how a passionate society devolves into a paralyzed crowd, we have to examine Kierkegaard's logic regarding how individuals surrender their personal identity to the times. Kierkegaard begins his argument on page 7 by analyzing a common scenario, two people accusing each other of disloyalty. As we map this onto a logic tree, we see two distinct figures. When these two people change and misunderstandings arise, a harsh vector of accusation shoots from one to the other. Each accuses the other of unfaithfulness, rather than examining themselves. Kierkegaard identifies the paradox here. The person upbraiding another for changeableness is actually guarding against their own instability. By demanding loyalty from an external source, the accuser declares that he has the law of his existence outside himself. Kierkegaard defines changeability through the lens of time. Time changes everything. Therefore, the passage of time is the exact mechanism that reveals who actually remained true. He points out the deep irony that an accuser might eventually realize, upon inspection, that they were the one who changed. Yet, out of fresh vehemence, they will stubbornly continue complaining about the other person. Just because someone is shrieking the loudest about loyalty, it does not mean they possess any faithfulness to themselves. Demanding loyalty from an external source is the ultimate proof that an individual lacks a solid internal ethical foundation. We can now scale this previous visualization up to the cultural level. Figure A expands into an amorphous shape representing the age, and figure B becomes a single dot, the author. The reading public drops a slightly older author and shoots that exact same accusation of unfaithfulness at them, claiming the author has failed to keep up with the times. But Kierkegaard exposes the logical trap here. We must define what is actually meant by the phrase, the age. The age is not a fixed reality. It is a constantly shifting abstraction that the crowd strictly defines by its newest replacement. This creates a direct conflict between a shifting cultural abstraction and the biological, ethical reality of an individual human being. An individual human ages and matures organically year by year, like the expanding rings of a sturdy tree. A person cannot simply abandon their internal development to become an entirely new man every time the cultural mood shifts. Because the age constantly replaces itself, remaining faithful to an age guarantees that the author will eventually become unfaithful to it. This creates a metaphysical confusion. The system actively punishes the author who stays true to themselves, while rewarding the unstable mind that frantically chases every new trend. Kierkegaard concludes that unless the ethical reality of the individual is granted priority over the rash demands of the times, every generation is guilty of unjust, nonsensical behavior toward its predecessors. Kierkegaard then identifies exactly who tends to voice these unjust demands. He points directly to the youth. He contrasts the youth with the wise man. A wise man understands that everything he says applies to himself, and he holds himself to his own standards. The youth makes grand demands of everyone else, but never assumes the demands apply to him. They squander people, discarding the hard-won efforts of previous generations, because they feel entitled to staggering cultural results immediately, without the labor of achieving them. When they speak in the name of the era, Kierkegaard notes sarcastically, they sound like an intoxicated divinity rather than an individual human being. Look at the sheer cruelty of this dynamic. Kierkegaard compares the demands of the times to a fictional pirate captain, or the Roman emperor Heliogabalus, allotting scantier and scantier rations to superior individuals while crushing them under arbitrary expectations. It is an ultimate hypocrisy. The youth, who have been entirely unfaithful to the slow process of becoming human, set themselves up as an enormous creditor, demanding faithfulness from everyone else. The demand of the times operates as a weapon of self-deception. It is wielded by those who wish to avoid the rigorous, slow work of personal ethical development by hiding inside the abstraction of the crowd. Kierkegaard offers a distinct antidote to this cultural arrogance, a Socratic fear of being deceived by oneself. He argues that the self-deceived are the most miserable people of all, and the absolute lowest among them are those presumptuously deceived by their own arrogance. The crowd ignores the core Socratic practice, the discipline of drawing modest conclusions from the very little that one actually understands. He outlines this definitive contrast. For the voice of God is always a whisper, while the demand of the age is a thousand-tongued rumor. This rumor produces an abracadabra that generates only confused affabes and empty mechanical production. The loudest, most strident demands of society are almost always the least divine and the furthest removed from objective truth. This brings us back to 1846 and the Corsair affair. Kierkegaard's analysis of the thousand-tongued rumor explains exactly why he viewed the tabloids on the press as an existential threat to the individual. Look at this final comparison. The age of revolution moved with a cohesive vector of passion. The present age is a chaotic web of static rumor and endless calculation, functioning as an indifferent power that levels all distinct individuality into a flat, gray average. Kierkegaard's final plea in the text is a call to renounce the inhuman demands of the times by returning to deep self-concern. This self-concern requires patience. It looks like comprehending slowly, learning from venerable elders rather than the luminaries of the moment, and being built up by faithful service over a lifetime. To survive the modern age of mass media and calculation, one must reject the rumor of the crowd entirely and embrace the difficult, quiet whisper of true selfhood.